This is DW News live from Berlin. He is in the House. Donald Trump is set to take the stage in Cleveland to give the speech of his life. It's the final evening of the Republican National Convention, and Trump is preparing to accept the nomination for U.S. president. But first, his daughter, Ivanka, will introduce him to the crowd. We're going to go live to Cleveland, inside the arena. I'm Brent Goff. It's good to have you with us. History is about to be made in American politics. One of the most remarkable and unlikely candidates for the White House, the real estate tycoon, Donald Trump, is poised to accept the nomination of the Republican Party to run for president. Now, tonight's highly anticipated speech will mark the end of what has been a rough and messy week for the GOP, a convention that's been marred from day one. Plagiarism accusations against Trump's wife, Melania. That started the week. And top GOP officials refusing to endorse the brash billionaire. It shows just how divided the party remains, and it reminds Trump that he has to convince more than just Democrats that he is the right person to move into the White House. All right, lots to talk about, and we're still waiting for Ivanka to take to the stage. And while we're waiting, we're going to do some talking of our own. And to do that, I've got Boris Foreman here at the big table with me. He is with the JFK Institute here in Berlin. Boris, it's good to have you back here. And our man in Cleveland, Richard Walker. He's been covering the convention for us. Richard, really, we're in the final moments, aren't we, before Ivanka comes on the stage. Kind of set the stage for us right now.
Yeah, well, there's a huge amount of anticipation here in the Quicken Loans Arena, and I think you can hear behind me Ivanka Trump being called out onto the stage. So she is the fourth child of Donald Trump to be speaking so far this week, and the last person to be speaking before her father.
Okay, we're going to, let's just take a moment now and listen to Ivanka Trump speak.
Thank you. 1 year ago, I introduced my father when he declared his candidacy. In his own way and through his own sheer force of will, he sacrificed greatly to enter the political arena as an outsider. And to all of America, my father and our next president, Donald J. Trump.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Friends, delegates, and fellow Americans, I humbly and gratefully accept your nomination for the presidency of the United States. We will make America strong again. We will make America proud again. We will make America safe again. And we will make America great again. God bless you and good night. I love you.
And there you have it. That is the acceptance speech of Donald Trump accepting the nomination by the Republican Party in the United States. He is now running for president. And we were talking about some of the key points, but let's just talk about the time. We did not expect the speech to be as long as it was, did we, Boris? It was over, well, what, about an hour and 15, hour and 20 minutes?
Well, we saw some snippets beforehand. We knew that it would be lengthy, but not quite that long. So 1 hour and 50 minutes might even break some records here.
It may do that. And we were saying for a long period into the speech, we were waiting for policy specifics, right? I mean, it took him a long time to get there, but then he did get to them. What for you, what are the biggest takeaways from this?
One of the things is that the speech was very redundant and quite repetitive. There was a conflation of different things that came up now and again. Foreign policy and domestic policy wasn't clearly separated.
Yeah.
The main message was, we are threatened from the inside and from the outside. I'm the only one who can solve this crisis. And Hillary Clinton is basically part of the corrupt political establishment and the media and big business.
Yeah, I mean, it was that. Big business, the elite media, and Hillary Clinton were that. Richard, let me ask you, what was it like there inside the Q Arena? Did you get the impression as well that Donald Trump is really the almost like the Messiah, if you will, the only one who can save the U.S.?
Well, I mean, that really is the message coming almost not just from him, but also from his daughter, Ivanka Trump, just before him. I found her speech also very interesting. Of course, really sort of trying to stress the private side of Donald Trump, the side of Donald Trump that you don't see, on the stage and in his rallies. But yeah, he did almost sound like a sort of Messiah-like figure in the way that she was describing him. Someone who had unique capabilities and unique gifts to sort of rescue America. And of course, that came across in his own version in Donald Trump's speech as well. But I think it did go down very well in the audience. I think the audience really kind of rallied to it. The audience didn't seem to tire, as we just heard there. It was a very long speech, but there was no sense that anyone was getting bored. There were big cheer lines, big applause lines right the way through it. And that's one reason that it dragged on so long, was that he kept stopping for all that applause and all of those cheers.
And what did you think? I want to stay with his daughter for just a moment, Richard. We were talking about it here in the studio, and it took her a long time as well, maybe to warm up or show the side of a daughter who really loves her father. I mean, for me, I got the impression that this was a businesswoman who was trying to make the case for a business deal. What was your take?
Yeah, I think there was some of that. And, she talked about when she'd been a child and playing with sort of yellow Lego bricks at building buildings. So that sense of business and family just totally intermingled within this family. But I think that's the way it is with the other with the sons as well. Also members of the sort of Trump empire as well as the Trump family. And I think it's a very striking thing that the family really was rolled out to very, very heavy extent this week. Melania Trump, of course, Donald Trump's wife as well. Sorry, just a bit of a distraction here with some people here. Yeah, I mean, it was really a family affair here with like Donald Trump's wife, 4 children on that stage back there,
Right.
all being wheeled out to speak in Donald Trump's favor. But partly that also betrayed the fact that Donald Trump couldn't attract the usual kind of A-list Republicans who you would get to come to a convention like this. For instance, the Bush family, Mitt Romney, John McCain, both former Republican presidents and both former Republican nominees staying away this time. So the family, in a way, was compensating for that.
Of course, what about the fact that we didn't have the A-list Republicans in Cleveland? I mean, can we say then that the convention was a success?
Well, I think that's a great point to raise. Yes, the children played an important role, but they were also placeholders for those who didn't show up. And you might have noticed also that in the speech that Trump gave, he didn't mention Cruz, who was there, of course, with a very ambivalent role, but he also didn't mention George W. Bush.
Right.
So when he was talking about Iraq and Afghanistan, all this instability in the Middle East region, he blamed it all on Hillary Clinton, basically. And that was an interesting move to make. Overall, it was a not so surprising speech, I think. It was a best-of compilation of the things he had been saying before. One of the things that did surprise me, though, was the emphasis on infrastructure finance and on the military spending, additional spending, many government interventions that are needed also for education that he was talking about, that wouldn't go down well with most of the Republicans.
Well, we were saying that earlier this evening. I mean, he's saying that the roads, the bridges, the highways in the U.S. are dilapidated. They have to be modernized. I mean, he's talking about massive, massive government expenditures right now. And at the same time, he's saying that the tax burden has to be lessened. So how can he, I mean, obviously the math doesn't work there, does it?
Well, this is a message that Barack Obama has been delivering at every of his State of the Union addresses. He's been mentioning the crumbling infrastructure of the U.S. every time, every single year since 2008. So that's a message that has become common sense in the U.S. But it's striking. I mean, there is a strong tension between the type of huge investments that you need to make for infrastructure spending and the free trade rhetoric on the other hand. But he's been promising everything to everybody, basically.
Well, but he certainly does not sound like the Republicans that we know or that we've grown up with. Richard, did you get the sense there as well did you hear from the delegates maybe complaining or maybe even they were happy that this is a different type of Republican because he is friendly when it comes to government expenditures?
Well, I don't know how many people here were would be particularly happy about that. I mean, I think a lot of Republicans are very concerned about that. They're very concerned not only about that in particular on spending, but just on all sorts of other issues, social issues, for instance, on which Donald Trump is a lot more relaxed than most religious conservatives here. So I think, if anything, those things would be a cause of concern to fiscal conservatives and to social conservatives. But Donald Trump has won over those people, if he has won them over, not with policy specifics or his positions on particular things like that, but with his overall stance, this overall message that he's a strong leader who wants to, keep going back to that slogan that he's had that is so powerful and sustains him through this whole year to make America great again. And I think a lot of people who've been persuaded by Donald Trump basically sign up to that, and even if they don't like much of the small print. But then again, there really isn't very much small print with Donald Trump. It is very, very broad brush stuff. Yeah. And he claims that he will do these things, but he's not really subjected to the same kind of scrutiny as most other candidates, because a lot of the more serious think tanks and people who look at these numbers would sort of scratch their heads and think, well, it doesn't really stand up. But it comes from Donald Trump, to whom the usual standards don't necessarily apply.
Yeah, let me pick up a little bit on the social issues, because there was a lot of anticipation tonight about the speech from Peter Thiel, the tech billionaire from Silicon Valley, who is openly gay and who told the delegates that he was gay and proud to be gay and proud to be an American. How did that go down there, or was it even an issue?
Well, no, it wasn't. I mean, it had been trailed as a novelty at a Republican convention. I think some were saying that this is the first time that something like that had happened. And that was his line, this, tech billionaire, one of the founders of PayPal, standing up there on the stage and saying, I am gay, I'm a Republican, and I'm an American. Or rather, I'm proud to be gay, I'm proud to be a Republican, I'm proud to be an American. And that did get a warm round of applause, but I wouldn't say that it got a bigger round of applause than anything else.
Yeah, exactly. I was wondering
what... I think it is certainly being...
Go ahead. We've got Richard. We've got the soundbite from Peter Thiel. Let's see if we can just play that one more time, just to see what he said.
Every American has a unique identity. I am proud to be gay. I am proud to be a Republican. But most of all, I am proud to be an American.
I mean, I wanted to see the reaction that we were going to get from the vice presidential candidate, Mr. Pence. And unfortunately, the cameras, this was a missed opportunity, the cameras didn't pan over to him. But this really was, it was almost a non-story, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, you're right. Mike Pence certainly has a reputation as being a very socially conservative, particularly on gay rights. But I think those Republicans who want a more progressive Republican Party would have been happy with what happened with Peter Thiel this evening. They would see it as a step in the right direction. You had, for instance, Ari Fleischer, who was formerly a senior member of George W. Bush's administration, talking about that. But then on the other hand, the Republican Platform Committee, which sat just before this convention to set up the party platform, which is supposed to be the sort of the manifesto of the party that all of the people standing for election on this year take to their constituents. That was one of the most anti-gay platforms that anybody had anticipated would have been possible at this moment in time with respect to a number of issues. So I think a lot of the log cabin Republicans, for instance, which is a gay group within the Republican Party, was very disappointed with that. So I'm not sure it's possible to say from what happened with Peter Thiel tonight that suddenly the Republican Party has made a great leap forward on gay rights. But just finally, before going back to you, Brent, we should stress that Donald Trump is distinctly relaxed on gay rights, and also the fuss about transgender use of bathrooms this year. He's been very relaxed about that, saying that Caitlyn Jenner, perhaps the most prominent transgender person in America, is free to use whichever bathroom she likes when she goes to Trump Tower.
When she goes to Trump Towers, we've been waiting, of course, all week to see if she was going to put a video on Facebook from inside the Q Arena letting us know which restroom she uses. What about the dichotomy that we are seeing tonight? Behind you, Richard, I mean, it looks like obviously a celebration, it's a party. But what we heard in this speech tonight, Boris, was death, destruction, terrorism, weakness. And actually, we've got the soundbite, my producer's telling me. Let's listen. This is what the legacy of Hillary Clinton is, according to Donald Trump.
After 15 years of wars in the Middle East, after trillions of dollars spent and thousands of lives lost, the situation is worse than it has ever been before. This is the legacy of Hillary Clinton: death, destruction, terrorism, and weakness.
I mean, that is about as serious of an indictment that you can make on a candidate. And a lot of people would say, obviously, it's more than exaggerated, even if they don't agree with Hillary Clinton. I mean, but he was saying what the crowd wanted to hear.
Since you mentioned the crowd also before, let me just say one thing that I just noticed is that the song that they played when he was moving out was "You Can't Always Get What You Want," which I find quite an interesting choice as a song. Yes,
that's true. It's very realpolitik too, right?
Yeah, it's a very humoresque way of putting it.
Yeah.
Yes, but Absolutely, it's a very strong indictment. But it follows a certain pattern. I mean, he's been trying to bring Hillary Clinton into connection, of course, with her husband, Bill Clinton,
Right.
during the 1990s, bringing her into connection with Barack Obama, blaming the failures or the perceived failures of the Obama administration onto her. So it's not very surprising that he's doing that, but he's doing it with a stark language that we maybe can't get used to.
I mean, it is. It's almost a little. It's unsettling, isn't it, Richard? I heard a lot of people saying today, some delegates as well, saying how great the United States is, and the fact that there is this immigration problem is because so many people want to come to the United States. So the picture of it being a place where things have fallen apart, I mean, those two realities, they just don't fit.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think maybe that is one of the dichotomies of this election. If you think that America is steadily getting better and making progress, then you're going to vote for Hillary Clinton. If you think that it's getting steadily worse, you're going to vote for Donald Trump. I think that really is pretty much one of the core dividing lines of this entire election. And Donald Trump, just by having the word "again" at the end of his slogan, it really is talking about a return to a past that is seen as greater than America's present.
Also, this evening in the speech, what really drew the ire of Donald Trump was the situation with police officers being shot in the United States. And he said that if he becomes president, the day that he's inaugurated, the end of lawlessness will begin. Let's just listen to what he had to say about law and order.
I have a message to every last person threatening the peace on our streets and the safety of our police. When I take the oath of office next year, I will restore law and order to our country. Believe me, believe me. I will work with and appoint the best and brightest prosecutors and law enforcement officials to get the job properly done. In this race for the White House, I am the law and order candidate.
I saw a lot of people tweeting when he said that this is the closest that Donald Trump has become or has come tonight to President Erdogan in Turkey. Which is interesting. But also, isn't he making an indictment, Boris, against law enforcement officers in the U.S.? He says he's going to bring the best people in. Right. So what does that say about the people right now?
I mean, again, yes, there is a certain contradiction, but I think that the way the argument would go is, under the conditions of the Barack Obama administration, they cannot do what they are supposed to do. And this is why we need to get rid of red tape, etc., deregulate, and so on. But I think if there is one leitmotif that goes through the entire speech, and that also goes through the speeches beforehand that build up to Trump's nomination speech, it's the idea not only of law and order, but of a benevolent patriarch. So somebody who is strong, who is rich, yes, who is a good negotiator, who's a businessman.
And that's very American, capitalist American, right?
Absolutely, but he's also open, he has an open ear for the working men and women.
Although he himself does not, he's not that.
Yeah,
right?
that's the interesting thing. There is this notion of upward mobility and the American dream, which he is supposed to incorporate, but which he doesn't because he was born rich, so to speak. Right. I think this is one of the reasons why he brought in Tom Barack, who had this kind of a background story, and also why he mentioned his father, who did have to go through this path.
Right. That's an excellent point. Richard, let me ask you, did you hear any of the delegates talking about Trump's business history this week, or the fact that he has filed bankruptcy protection several times in his business career?
I certainly haven't heard that uttered a single time, Brent. I mean, I think generally people look on Donald Trump's business history as a positive. They think that he is someone who has been successful, and of course, people argue about to what degree he really has been successful in various different ways. But I think all in all, that is seen as a positive, and I think that people are refreshed to have someone who comes from outside politics. And I think also, I think there's an appetite that very much for that, not just among Republicans. There is an appetite for that among independents. You do hear quite a few independents talking about that. Obviously not this week, but that is one of the things that appeals to them about Donald Trump.
What about Bernie Sanders? What about
rhetoric.
Did you get the impression, briefly, Richard, what about the Bernie Sanders supporters? He was speaking to them tonight, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was, and he is making that pitch that, he has problems with sort of international free trade sort of architecture that's been built over the last couple of decades, the same sort of problems that Bernie Sanders supporters would have. But I would not really sign up to the idea that an awful lot of Bernie Sanders voters are going to switch to Donald Trump. I think they're too profoundly different in other ways. Bernie Sanders very much positioned as a progressive, of course, on a whole host of things, and Donald Trump, even though many conservatives don't believe he's a conservative, but in his outward pitch to the voters is profoundly conservative. I think a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters really don't like that.
Well, you agree with that, Boris?
I do agree. I mean, there have been polls that show that maybe 10 to 20% of former Bernie Sanders supporters might move over and switch their opinion and vote for Trump. But I do agree. I think there are overlaps, interestingly, on the fringes of both the left and the right when it comes to free trade agreements, when it comes to working conditions, etc. But they come at these points from very different perspectives and very different angles. And I think it's difficult to reconcile some of these issues.
Yeah, I think we'll be seeing that a lot too in the next couple of months. Let's just remind you of what our top story is right now. Donald Trump has just wrapped up his keynote acceptance speech as the Republican candidate for President of the United States, vowing to make America great again. He told supporters that he will reduce crime and violence in the streets and fix the economy.